I am Juliette Hale, 30 years old, and nothing in my life had prepared me for the moment I watched my brother, Derek, slap my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, across the face. It happened at our annual family reunion, a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary of sorts. What made it monumentally worse was hearing the sound that followed the sharp crack of his hand against her skin. It was the sound of my father, Howard, smirking. He audibly declared that she needed to learn some shame. My mother, Alina, her laughter a series of high, tinkling notes, chimed in her agreement. In their bubble of casual cruelty, they believed they were safe, untouchable. They had forgotten about the documentary microphone clipped discreetly to a nearby lampshade, recording every word, every sound, every damning piece of evidence. Before I detail the methodical way I dismantled my brother's life and turned it into a living hell, I invite you to settle in. Growing up in the Hale household meant I had to understand my designated place from a very young age. I was the scapegoat, the convenient receptacle for all family frustrations, the child who could never, ever do anything right. In stark contrast, my older brother Derek was the golden child, a boy who could do no wrong, whose every action was praised and pedestaled. Our toxic dynamic was cemented long before I possessed the vocabulary to articulate the injustice of it all. My father, Howard, a formidable and highly successful corporate attorney, held specific, rigid expectations for his children. Derek met them perfectly, effortlessly. He was athletic, a star on every team. He was academically gifted, his report cards a source of endless pride for our father. Most importantly, he was willing, even eager, to mirror our father's aggressive, domineering personality. I, on the other hand, was a disappointment. In appearance, I was more like my mother, Alina, but our personalities diverged sharply. She was content, even happy, to be the enforcer of my father's stringent rules, the placid gatekeeper of the established family hierarchy. I was the opposite. I questioned things. I pushed back. This inherent curiosity, this refusal to accept things at face value, branded me as the family troublemaker. My mother would tell relatives at our strained family gatherings that Juliette just didn't understand how to behave properly, shaking her head with a practiced, weary disappointment that she had perfected over the years. Not like our Derek, she would always add, her voice filled with pride. By the time I was 16, I had constructed a protective shell around myself, a fortress of indifference. At home, I learned the art of making myself invisible, keeping my head down, my opinions to myself, and meticulously counting the days until I could finally escape their suffocating orbit. College was my promised land, and when I met Jason during my first year, he seemed like my personal ticket to freedom. He was kind, he was attentive, and most importantly, he saw me. He truly saw me in a way my family had never bothered to. We married when I was 20. In retrospect, it was far too young, but I was blinded by a desperate, all-consuming need for a family of my own, one built on love, not on power and control. My parents attended our modest wedding, their smiles as tight as the knots in my stomach. Their criticism was thinly veiled, whispered comments about everything from the simple cut of my dress to the heartfelt vows we had written ourselves. Derek, already at 22, a rising star on the corporate ladder, arrived with an ostentatiously expensive gift and a wedding speech that masqueraded as supportive, but was laced with his signature condescension. He joked to a room of uncomfortable laughter that he never thought his little sister would find someone willing to take her on. He clapped Jason on the back, wishing him good luck and adding that he would definitely need it. For a few precious years, I believed I had truly escaped. Jason and I settled into a small, cozy apartment. I finished my degree in communications while working part-time. We weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but we were happy, building a life on our own terms. When I became pregnant with Lily at 24, it felt as though every broken piece of my life was finally falling into place. Lily arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, a perfect 7 pounds and 3 ounces of pure joy, with her father's brilliant blue eyes and my dark, curly hair. Holding her tiny body against my chest, I made a silent, sacred promise. She would always know, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was loved exactly as she was. She would never be made to question her worth the way I had been forced to question mine every single day of my childhood. The first fractures in the foundation of my marriage appeared when Lily was 3. Jason began working late more frequently, becoming emotionally distant, a stranger in our own home. My unease grew until I found the text messages on his phone, a string of intimate conversations with someone named Kara. When I confronted him, he denied it at first, his lies clumsy and transparent. Then, the truth came out. He admitted to a 6-month affair with a coworker. We attempted counseling, but his heart was not in it. The damage was done. By the time Lily turned 4, we were divorced. I didn't tell my family about the affair. I knew they would twist it, somehow making Jason's betrayal my failure. I simply told them we had grown apart. My mother, of course, still managed to blame me. She said over the phone that men don't just leave happy homes, her tone accusatory as she asked what I had done to push him away. Single motherhood brought a host of financial challenges I hadn't anticipated. My salary as an administrative assistant at Madison Marketing was barely enough to cover our rent and childcare. On several occasions, I had to swallow my pride, a bitter pill, and ask my parents for help. An unexpected car repair, a medical bill for Lily, a list of expensive school supplies. Each time the money came, but it was accompanied by a long, patronizing lecture about responsibility, about my poor life choices, about my failure to plan. Meanwhile, Derek's life from the outside seemed to be a portrait of perfection. He had become the youngest vice president in the history of his prestigious financial firm. He married Natalie, a kind pediatrician from a very wealthy family, and they lived in a sprawling, magazine-worthy house in the suburbs. They had no children. Derek would explain that they were focusing on their careers first, a decision my parents lauded as responsible and mature. They held Derek and Natalie up as the shining example of success I should aspire to. My father would say whenever I visited that if only I had applied myself like my brother, I could have had something to show for myself, his gaze sweeping over my modest car and simple clothes with disdain. Despite all of this, I clung to the idea that Lily should know her grandparents and her uncle. Children deserve family connections, I told myself, a mantra I repeated to drown out my own doubts. I thought I could act as a buffer, a shield between my daughter and the toxicity that I had grown up with. So, when the annual family reunion at my parents' lake house approached this summer, I made the fateful decision to attend for the first time in 3 years. My best friend, Tara, was skeptical. She asked if I was sure about this, reminding me that these people had never once had my back. I replied, with more conviction than I felt, that they were still family, and that Lily adored the lake. I insisted I could handle one weekend for her sake. Lily was ecstatic about the trip. At 6, she was a vibrant bundle of energy and insatiable curiosity, with a passion for singing that filled every corner of our small apartment at all hours of the day. She possessed my stubborn streak, but also a radiant confidence that I envied, a complete fearlessness about taking up space in the world in a way I had never been allowed to. She bounced as we packed, asking if Uncle Derek and Grandma and Grandpa would be there, and if she could swim in the lake every single day. I promised her yes to all of it, forcing a smile while ignoring the knot of apprehension tightening in my chest. I mentioned that her cousins would be coming too. I deliberately didn't mention my brother-in-law, Paul, who had married my father's sister, Linda. He would be there, recording the entire reunion for a family documentary. My father had become obsessed with the idea of documenting the Hale family legacy, with a particular focus on Derek's meteoric achievements. As we drove the long hours toward the lake house, I rehearsed calming mantras in my head. It's just 3 days. I can handle anything for 3 days. I am not that scared little girl anymore. I will protect Lily from experiencing what I did. Looking back, I realize I was desperately trying to convince myself of something that was fundamentally impossible. You cannot protect someone from toxic, venomous dynamics while simultaneously placing them directly in harm's way. Some lessons, I was about to learn, are taught in the hardest way imaginable. The Hale family lake house stood like a monument to old money and pretension, its weathered cedar exterior and sprawling deck overlooking the vast, shimmering expanse of Lake Michigan. As I pulled our modest sedan into the circular driveway, parking behind Derek's gleaming new BMW and my parents' pristine Mercedes, I felt that old, familiar shrinking sensation, a physical contraction in my chest that I always experienced in my family's presence. Lily, however, was oblivious. She exclaimed that we were here, unbuckling her seatbelt before the car had even fully stopped. Her excitement was a palpable, joyful force, entirely innocent of the treacherous undercurrents that were already making my shoulders tense up to my ears. She begged to go see the lake right away. I told her we had to get settled first, forcing a smile, and say hello to everyone. The front door swung open as we approached, revealing my mother in pressed linen pants and a cashmere sweater that defied the summer heat. Her highlighted hair was perfectly styled, not a single strand out of place. She said there we were, her eyes scanning me with a quick, critical sweep before settling on Lily with a fraction more warmth. She added that they were beginning to think we'd changed our minds. I explained that the traffic was heavy as I accepted her stiff, air-light hug. Inside, the great room buzzed with the low hum of relatives arranging platters of food and mixing drinks. My father stood by the massive stone fireplace, deep in a hushed conversation with my uncle, Robert. He glanced up, offering a curt nod of acknowledgement before seamlessly resuming his discussion about stock options. Derek and Natalie emerged from the kitchen, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. My brother had our father's build, tall and broad-shouldered, but his features were sharper, more calculated. His smile never, ever quite reached his eyes. He announced loudly enough for the entire room to hear that the prodigal sister had returned, and with little Miss Lily. He told her she had grown since he last saw her, his voice dripping with false joviality. Lily, suddenly shy in the face of his booming presence, pressed herself against my leg and whispered a hello to her Uncle Derek. Natalie stepped forward, her smile genuine and warm. Unlike the rest of the Hale clan, she had always been kind to me, though in the carefully distant way of someone who recognized the toxic family dynamic but understood it was not her place to challenge it. She said it was lovely to see us both, embracing me warmly. She told Lily that her cousins were down by the dock if she wanted to join them after we got settled. Lily's eyes lit up, and she bounced with anticipation, asking if she could go. I promised her she could after we took our bags to our room. Derek took a sip of his bourbon, eyeing me over the rim of his crystal glass. He asked if I was still working at that little marketing place, feigning forgetfulness about its name. He wondered if I was an assistant to someone important. I corrected him, my voice steady, refusing to take the bait. I was an administrative assistant, and yes, I was still there. I added that I had actually gotten a small promotion last month. He replied with manufactured, over-the-top enthusiasm that it was so nice for me. Then, he turned to my father and loudly mentioned that he had just closed a 7-figure deal with Anderson Tech, and did he mention the bonus they were giving him? Just like that, the room's attention shifted away from me as my father clapped Derek on the shoulder, his voice booming with pride. That was his boy, he declared, always aiming higher. My brother-in-law, Paul, was quietly setting up his camera equipment near the large bay windows. He gave me a small, sympathetic nod as I passed by. Paul had married into the family, but he had never fully adopted their values, which made him something of an outsider, much like me. I asked him if he was planning to get everyone's good side. He replied quietly that he was trying to. He explained that my dad wanted a lot of footage of Derek talking about his career achievements. He had also set up wireless microphones around the main areas to capture what he called natural conversations. Our assigned bedroom was, predictably, the smallest in the house, tucked away in the far corner with a dreary view of the neighboring property rather than the beautiful lake. I helped Lily unpack, listening to her excited chatter about seeing her cousins. She wanted to know if she could wear her blue swimsuit and if she could show everyone her new song she had practiced all week. My heart tightened with a fierce, protective ache. Lily's uninhibited, joyful enthusiasm was the very quality that had been systematically crushed out of me at her age. I told her of course she could sing, honey, but to remember that sometimes adults are talking, so she should try to find a good moment. The first evening proceeded with the expected, exhausting undercurrent of competition and comparison. My father dominated the dinner conversation with a relentless barrage of questions about Derek's latest professional triumphs, while my mother found opportunities to comment on everything from my hair, suggesting it was time for a more professional cut to my parenting style. She observed that Lily seemed very energetic, and didn't I think some structure would be good for her? I noticed how Lily's cousins, ranging in age from 7 to 12, had already absorbed and begun to mirror the family hierarchy. They corrected her pronunciation, they rolled their eyes when she spoke too loudly, and they excluded her from their games with a practiced, subtle politeness that adults might not notice, but which children feel with searing intensity. After dinner, while I was helping with the dishes, my Aunt Linda approached me. She mentioned that Derek had said I'd been struggling since the divorce. She told me they had a position opening up in their company's mailroom if I was interested. I thanked her, choosing my words carefully. I told her I was actually up for another promotion at Madison and that I was heading a small project team now. She patted my arm with a look of clear disbelief, saying that the offer stood. Sometimes, she added, we just need to be realistic about our capabilities. Later that night, as I tucked Lily into her bed, I found her unusually quiet. I asked if everything was okay. She traced patterns on the quilt with her finger and told me that her cousin Emma had said her singing was annoying. And Uncle Derek had told her that girls shouldn't be so loud if they wanted people to like them. She then told me that Grandpa had said I was too loud as a kid, too, and that was why I always got in trouble. I swallowed hard against a surge of hot anger, recognizing the familiar, toxic patterns repeating themselves in a new generation. I took a deep breath. I told her, my voice firm but gentle, that her voice was beautiful and she had every right to be heard. Some people, I explained, just don't know how to appreciate enthusiasm. I added that sometimes adults are wrong, even grandparents, and especially her mom's parents. She giggled at that, a small, welcome sound, and I kissed her forehead. I promised her that tomorrow would be better. We would go swimming and have fun, just the two of us. But as I lay awake for hours in that unfamiliar bed, listening to the muffled laughter of my parents and brother still drinking downstairs, I couldn't shake the heavy, sinking feeling that I had made a terrible, irreversible mistake by bringing Lily here. Some environments are toxic no matter how much time has passed, and the Hale family lake house was proving to be exactly that. Morning arrived with brilliant sunshine streaming through the thin curtains of our room. Lily woke with her usual boundless enthusiasm, the previous day's hurts apparently forgotten in the promise of lake swimming and breakfast waffles. She bounced on the edge of my bed, already dressed in her favorite blue sundress with yellow butterflies, telling me to wake up. She announced that Uncle Paul said they were making a special breakfast in the big room. I checked my phone. 8:17 a.m. I had hoped to sleep longer after a restless night, but Lily's excitement was contagious. I told her okay, I was up. The big room was what my parents pretentiously called the Great Hall, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings and a wall of windows overlooking the lake. It doubled as a dining room and gathering space, with excellent acoustics that amplified every single sound. By the time Lily and I arrived, most of the family was already assembled. My father presided at the head of the massive oak table, newspaper in hand. My mother supervised the catering staff they'd hired for the weekend. Heaven forbid she actually cook for her family. Derek and Natalie sat with my father, engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation about property investments. I offered a good morning to the room generally, receiving only distracted nods in return. My mother told me coffee was on the sideboard and directed Lily to the small table by the window where the other children were eating. I noticed Paul adjusting microphones discreetly around the room, preparing for another day of documentary filming. He gave me a small wave as I poured coffee. I asked him quietly if he was getting all the family drama on tape. He replied with a meaningful look that my dad wanted authentic family interactions for posterity. The breakfast proceeded without incident at first. Lily joined her cousins, trying valiantly to enter their conversations while being subtly but consistently excluded. I sat with my Aunt Linda and her husband, making polite, vapid small talk about the weather and local property values. About 30 minutes into breakfast, the children finished eating and moved to the play area at the far end of the Great Hall. The adults remained at the table, the conversation growing louder as mimosas were refilled. I kept one eye on Lily, who had taken to singing softly to herself while coloring in a book I'd packed. Gradually, her singing grew more confident. It was a song from her favorite cartoon, something about friendship and adventures. Her sweet, clear voice carried in the acoustically designed room, occasionally rising above the din of adult conversation. I noticed Derek's jaw tightening each time Lily hit a high note. He shot several pointed, angry looks in my direction, which I deliberately pretended not to see. His nieces and nephews had abandoned Lily to play a board game, excluding her with a practiced, casual cruelty. My mother called from across the table, her voice sharp. She asked if I didn't think Lily was being a bit disruptive. Before I could formulate a response, Lily's voice soared into the chorus of her song, completely and innocently unaware of the thick tension her joyful noise was creating. Derek muttered, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause, for God's sake, and asked if I couldn't control my child for 5 minutes. I began to stand, my intention to quietly go to Lily and ask her to lower her volume when everything happened at once. Derek pushed back from the table abruptly, his heavy chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He strode toward the children's area, purpose and fury in his every step. I moved to intercept him, but my aunt asked me a question about my job that delayed me for just a few seconds. Seconds that changed everything. Derek reached Lily. She looked up at her uncle, her face lit with an innocent smile that quickly, horrifically, transformed into shock as his hand connected with her cheek. It was a full, open-handed slap that echoed through the suddenly, utterly silent room. Time seemed to freeze, to stretch and warp. Lily's small body rocked backward from the force of the blow. Her coloring book and crayons scattered on the floor. The red imprint of Derek's hand bloomed instantly, vividly, on her pale cheek. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the shocked faces as if he expected approval. He declared loudly, his voice dripping with contempt, that she was just like her mother and that both of us were useless. He added that she couldn't even behave properly in public. My father's voice cut through my stunned, horrified paralysis. He spoke with a distinct, satisfied smirk in his tone. Well, she needed to learn some shame. Girls these days, he pontificated, aren't taught proper manners. And then came my mother's tinkling, ghastly laugh. She added that Juliette never did understand the value of a quiet presence. I finally unfroze, a primal roar of rage building in my chest. I rushed to Lily, who had begun to sob, her small body shaking uncontrollably with the shock and the pain and the deep, public humiliation. As I gathered her into my arms, the full, crushing enormity of what had just happened crashed over me. I hissed at Derek, who stood watching with his arms crossed defiantly, and asked him what in the world was wrong with him. She was 6 years old. He replied coldly that she was old enough to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her noise. He then sneered that maybe if someone had taught me that lesson, I wouldn't be a divorced administrative assistant raising a brat alone. My father folded his newspaper with precise, deliberate movements. He told me I was overreacting, as usual. A little discipline, he said, never hurt anyone. He gestured toward Derek, telling me to look how well he had turned out, and then criticized me for coddling my girl. The room had divided into distinct, silent camps, those openly agreeing with Derek, their faces hard and judgmental, those who looked uncomfortable but remained silent, their eyes fixed on their plates, and Paul. I suddenly noticed Paul standing very still by his equipment, his face pale with shock. The microphone. The documentary microphones were on, recording everything. Through my blinding fury and my daughter's heartbroken tears, a single cold thought sliced through the chaos. We had irrefutable evidence of what had just happened. Derek must have realized it at the same time, because his eyes darted nervously towards Paul and the recording equipment. I found my voice. I stood up, holding Lily protectively in my arms, her tear-streaked face buried against my shoulder. I announced that we were done here. Nobody touches my daughter. Nobody. My mother told me to stop with the dramatics, her voice dripping with dismissal. It was hardly a tap, she insisted, and I was embarrassing myself. I laughed, a short, incredulous, bitter sound. I was embarrassing myself. My brother had just assaulted a 6-year-old for singing, and I was the source of embarrassment. Derek stepped toward me menacingly. He warned me to watch my mouth. He insisted it was discipline, not assault, something he claimed I clearly knew nothing about. I backed away, holding Lily tighter. I told him to stay away from us. We were leaving. As I headed for the stairs, Derek called after me, his voice a taunt. He asked if I was running away again, sneering that it was the only thing I had ever been good at. I didn't respond, focusing every ounce of my energy on getting Lily somewhere safe. As we reached our room, I could hear the murmur of conversation resuming below, my family already moving on, dismissing what they considered a minor incident rather than the unforgivable, line-crossing act it truly was. What they didn't know was that everything had changed. The rules of engagement had shifted, permanently. My brother had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And thanks to my father's obsession with documenting the Hale family legacy, I had the proof. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and protecting someone vulnerable? What would you have done? Share your thoughts. And if this story resonated, please subscribe for more stories about finding strength. Remember that you deserve to be heard, to take up space, and to use your voice without shame, just like Lily finally learned to do.